Hello and welcome to FPL Have a Beer, where I invite you to have a beer with me while I chat FPL. Please like if you enjoyed the video and to help get it out there so people see it. And at the time recording, I am getting close to 500 subscribers, and it would mean the world to me if I could get the channel up to 500 subscribers before the channel's 5th month birthday, which will actually be a couple of days after this comes out in March. If you could hit the subscribe button, I would really appreciate it. Thank you so much if you do this. So welcome to another interview in the Meet the FPL Manager / Meet the Content Creator interview series, where I ask some of the lovely FPL managers we have in the content creation sphere to come on and chat to me about their experiences of content creation, their thoughts about mental health and FPL, and we generally have a general chat about how their season's going towards the end. So for the latest interview, I have the absolute pleasure of welcoming on to the channel. I'm going to ask you about this name in a minute, Mark. The Godfather of FPL, and probably the most important person in the history of FPL content creation, Mark Sutherns. Mark, you were one of my 2 dream guests to get on when I started.
Oh, Gary, that's very kind of you.
You and Let's Talk FPL Andy. So I've who came on about a month ago. So I've sort of completed the circle. I can die a happy man now, or at least this interview series could die if it. Not that it's going to, but how are you, mate?
I'm good. Yeah, was Andy alright? I haven't watched the Andy episode. Was he good?
Yeah. It was pretty short. It was he only had an hour, but we got a lot in there. It was the only one I've done, to be honest, where I was a bit nervous as well. So I didn't.
Oh, don't be nervous with me, for God's sake.
I'm not.
See, Andy does short form content, and I do 2 hours on BlackBox, so this could go on for ages, couldn't it? But we'll see.
I think the difference is because I've communicated with Azaniella and stuff before, so it doesn't feel quite. Whereas with Andy, it's sort of like he's out there in Ireland on his own. It's a bit like talking to a man from a different world. Although he was lovely.
Yeah, he's a lovely fella. Yeah, he certainly is. Yeah.
So before I get on to the normal questions, when I was researching this, the term FPL Godfather appears a lot in relation to your name.
Yeah, well, okay.
Does that annoy? Yeah. Does that annoy you? Do you have any idea how it came about?
It didn't annoy me really, and it doesn't annoy me now really. But obviously, with all the cartel talk of the last 12 months, it takes on a bit more. Because I thought at first, obviously, it's harmless enough. It's certainly not a title I gave myself. And I didn't think anything of it, but then all the talk of the cartel this year, it's like, oh, I don't really want to be known as the Godfather with all that going around.
Because it's not like you're sort of like the co-creator, sort of the founder of everything that's come in FPL content, but the Godfather kind of suggests you also kill people on the side.
Yeah, I don't go into that. I get other people to take care of the messy stuff. No, it's I guess it harks back to me being around a long time, and like you say, I'm sure we'll talk about it today. A lot of the kind of stuff we see now, I guess, originated from what was created in Scout and with what Scout became, and blew up from there. The Scoutcast was one of the first podcasts, if not the first podcast, and we moved that to YouTube fairly early on. And then obviously that was before YouTube was a thing. And you mentioned Andy. Andy used to be on the Scoutcast, and I remember the day he came to me and said, "I'm thinking of doing my own FPL YouTube channel." I was like, "Yeah, go for it. That's all good. Don't worry." And so that shows you how far back that was. And so what I did on Scout played a part in what was to follow, and the community, the amount of content and stuff we have now. Yeah,
we're going to cover all that, Mark. I've got questions and all of that.
Sure.
But before I do that, you've watched a couple of interviews, have you? You've watched a few, so.
I managed to wade through the one with Az. Obviously, you can imagine what a struggle that was.
It was a long one as well, wasn't it?
It was a long one.
2 hours 10 minutes, I think. But I usually start before we go into FPL with a little sort of opening question to throw you into a false sense of security.
Usual technique,
Yeah, things like, where did you grow up? Who do you support? What are your first memories of football? Things like that, Mark.
Wow, okay. Grew up in West London. Always lived in West London, around like the Isleworth, Twickenham, Hounslow, kind of area, mainly in Hounslow, although I was on the borders of Witton and Twickenham as well. You could hear Twickenham Rugby Ground from where I lived as a child.
It's quite a nice area, isn't it, London, Twickenham?
Yeah, it's all right. I mean, I wasn't in Twickenham. You could just, I was not far. I was probably 15-minute walk from Twickenham Rugby Ground, but I was on the borders of Twickenham where I lived. Went to school in Hounslow in West London. My first experience of fantasy football was actually when I was at school.
Okay.
I'll probably we'll talk about that in a bit later. It wasn't really fancy football. It was on the way to being fancy football. If only I'd have followed that through and actually invented the game, but I didn't. But I almost did. But yeah, so I grew up there, and even though I was, I could hear the rugby crowd every game time there was a game on. Rugby was never the game that captured me, because my father was a club secretary for the local non-league side for Hounslow Town.
Okay.
And like me, he used to work every hour, God sent, not in his day job, but in that capacity as secretary of Hounslow. And if I wanted to see my dad, I had to go to the football. I had to be around football, because obviously my dad was very much in that world. And he was a key figure at that club. A lot of people depended on him for a lot of that club. He was the heartbeat, really, of the club at the time. And I didn't know that as a child. All I know was my dad used to come in from work and then go out again, and used to go to this thing called the football club. And I was never any good at football. My dad used to do coaching as well. My dad used to be a kids team coach.
So really was his life then?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. He was a football man. I mean, he was, when he was younger, when he was like in his 30s and 40s, he was a sports quizzer. And in those days, there used to be a quiz that used to be run nationally, and the final used to be on World of Sport with Dickie Davis. And he was on that twice. He got to the final twice with his club. So he was a very knowledgeable football man. Football and boxing were his subjects. And I remember growing up with just Rothmans everywhere and copies of the Ring magazine everywhere, because he used to research football and boxing, because he was a serious quizzer. And like I say, they got on national TV twice. So his pub, the Jockey, was one of the best, the best in the country at the time.
Money involved in it, like prize money?
Yeah, I think so. There was prize money. This is the 70s. And so I remember seeing my dad on TV on World of Sport and thinking, what's this about? But, I was never good enough to get in his teams. So my answer to that was, I've got to learn everything I can about football and sport in general. I remember watching Question of Sport with him, which was obviously a big thing in our house, because obviously he knew sport very well, and watching Question of Sport in the 70s and 80s when it was a big thing, with David Coleman and so on. And I used to pride myself in trying to learn as much as I could so I could answer the questions before my dad did, as a way of, I guess, making my dad proud, proving yourself to your dad like you do, like children do. Yeah. So my interest in football was come from him, really, and needing to get his attention. Bizarrely, someone had bought me an Arsenal mug in the early days when I was about 5 or 6, and back then my mum used that mug to wash my hair in the bath with, and one time she dropped it and smashed it, and my dad goes, he was a Fulham fan, he said, right, you've got to change your club now. So he didn't want me to support Arsenal, but I didn't want to support Fulham. The year was
Fulham would have been your most local team, would it?
Brentford with the local team, and that's my first memory, going to see Brentford versus Chelsea. I think it was couldn't have been a pre-season game because there was a big crowd there. Clive Walker was playing for Chelsea, the Mickey Droy. It was going, that was like 76, 77, 78 around then. But when the Arsenal mug smashed, I already had everything in red in my bedroom, so the team I had to support was going to wear red. And my dad's best mate, Chris Palmer, was round that night when they decided to choose my team, and they presented me with two options who wore red, Liverpool or Forest. And I asked to see the badges, because the reason why I liked Arsenal was it had the gun as the badge, which appealed to me, the old cannon as it was. When I saw the badges, I picked Forest on the badge. I was the only Forest fan at school, around a load of Liverpool, Man United fans. And then a year later, we won the European Cup. So there you go.
I was going to say, because Forest won the European Cup. That was in the early 70s, wasn't it? 79, 80, and then 80, 81. Was it that late? Oh, okay. I thought that was in the early 70s. I was going to say, I didn't think you were
by the end.
Didn't think you were that old.
I am that old. I was at junior school when they won it, and I remember coming back from Cub Scouts. I don't remember the Malmo final '79, but I remember the '80 final against Hamburg.
With Clough.
Yeah, with Clough.
Yeah.
I was at Cub Scouts, and I came home early from Cub Scouts to watch the European Cup final.
Wow.
And in those days, we used to have a tuck shop at the Cub Scouts, and I remember having a load of cola bottles and eating them out of my Cub Scout hat whilst watching the final. And John Robertson scored. I remember the moment he scored, and my dad saying to me, "It's not going to be like this forever. Make the most of it."
Well,
he was right.
You say that, but they're probably the nearest it's been this season, isn't it?
Now, yeah, which is absolutely amazing. Obviously, I mean, if we make it to the elite European stage, I never thought in my lifetime I would see that ever again.
Champions
Those
League,
days yeah, it'd be crazy. So I grew up a Forest fan after that incident with the Arsenal mug, and then I've always been a Forest fan. And as it happens, my dad's brother and all his family are in Nottingham, and they're season ticket holders or were. So my cousin, I see him and I share tickets with my cousin now. So I do have a family connection to Nottingham, as it turns out. They lived in Lincoln and they're Forest fans, and that just transpired out of coincidence, though. So I can claim I've got connections family-wise, but it wasn't really that reason.
No, I'm similar with Newcastle, as you can probably tell from my accent. Do you live anywhere in Nottingham now, or you? No,
I live in Sussex. I live miles away. I have to get the train into London and train up to Nottingham for home games. So it's fine though. I mean, obviously, I love it at the moment. So,
favourite player, Nottingham Forest player?
Ever?
Yeah.
John Robertson ever. John Robertson, when I was growing up, to me was just incredible player, and someone that was, at the time, an international player for Scotland. And I remember the 1982 World Cup and Scotland being in it and Robertson playing, and that was really, I felt really proud that a Forest player was playing in the World Cup. And I mean, he was probably my all-time Forest player. The Forest player that I've seen play, I have seen Robertson play actually, but that was not in his heyday. It's when he came back to us, and when his second spell with Forest, which wasn't very long, very short, and obviously was not his best at that time. Best player I've ever seen for Forest in the flesh is Stan Collymore.
That's what I thought you were going to say. Yeah, it was him and that's about the time I got into football. It was him and Brian Roy, wasn't it?
Yeah, but I watched Collymore when we were in the Championship, and it was incredible to watch a player just. Teams were just terrified of him. It was crazy.
He never really got to the heights at Liverpool or anything after he left, did he? It was his best there.
No, I said at the time when we came up to the Premier League, I was saying to people that he was going to be a 100-cap England player and be amongst the world's best players, best strikers. He looked like he was capable of that, and how he didn't achieve that, given the tools he had and the talent he had, I still don't know, and maybe only Stan knows. But this happens. But he gave me a lot of joy and pleasure watching him in the Forest colours. That's for sure.
Yeah, I know he had a lot of issues with depression and that. But so when did you first get into fantasy football, Mark? You alluded to it a bit earlier on.
Yeah, when I was at school and in the 80s, I started this game with a group of friends that we all seemed to do it in history, because it was the last lesson on a Friday, where it started as just to predict the score game,
right? And
then we started branching out to be if you could predict who got a hat trick, you got extra points. And then I made it, if you could predict who scored goals, you got extra points. And then it never went further than that. And then about 10 years later, fantasy football was invented, and it came over. The Fantasy League came and started appearing in national press, and that's when I started playing in the 90s.
I think they took the idea. I think America had it first with the NFL.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. It was nothing to do with me. It's just, it was so funny that I remember vividly passing this sheet around in history, getting people to put their scores and their scorers in. And when I look back, I'm like, blimey, that wasn't far away from me, because you obviously got points of goals and whatever. That wasn't far off from what turned out to be obviously a phenomenon. Yeah.
I wasn't implying your role wasn't important there, Mark.
No, it had nothing to do with it. But when it appeared, and it was in the papers, I think it was the Telegraph. And
early 90s.
Yeah, early 90s. Yeah, so I immediately got into that because I was like, well, this is for me. And where I worked at the time, I started up a league and got all the information out of the papers, printed the player list out. We did an auction, and then we did monthly meetings, so we did our transfers every month. And yeah, it was brilliant. It was great.
It was people took it that seriously, even back on the paper days.
Yeah. Oh, and I did with my group of friends at work. We had about 12 of us, and we had a league, and we ran it for about 4 or 5 seasons, and we met every month for a live game, because back then Sky had just started showing live games.
Yeah.
Yeah, we met every month when there was a live game on, went down the pub, and we did our transfers. The auctions were just highlights, obviously. And it was printed in the Telegraph every week with all the latest scores, and you had to manually work out your league table and stuff. We didn't sign up for what was a fantasy league, because you could get a fantasy league package, I think, but I don't know. I think you had to send that off in the post and stuff. But I did it manually.
You'd probably have to ring out a premium rate number, and it would be like first, then a long delay.
Yeah, that's how it was.
Mark Sutherns.
That's how it was if you wanted to make transfers in those days. I think if you played the national games in the paper, you had to phone up and leave your transfers on an answer machine. It was. Yeah, but it was still magic back then.
Yeah. I guess it's even more magic in a way, because it's like, I don't know. Imagine back. I never managed to set up an actual team. My mum would never let me back in those days. But I can imagine it's almost like more distant, whereas now it's all very in front of you on the computer, isn't it? Do you get what I mean?
Yeah, but it was a draft game, and draft was first experience of playing draft games and auctions, and I've started playing them again, and I really enjoy that.
Any particular early memories stand out in terms of like players and stuff like that in terms of fantasy football?
Yeah, when Dwight York went up front for Villa, he was still a midfielder in the game I played then, and I got him in the auction because I had an inkling that Ron Atkinson would play him up front, and he did, and he won the league for me that year. So that's one of my memories of that, because I think he got like 20 goals and 10 assists or something ridiculous about it. He was fantastic for Villa up front.
I actually remember my actual ever first memory of fantasy football is I bought a player guide, and I think it was a 94-95 season, and it recommended Dwight York for that exact reason you just said. Yeah, he was brilliant.
Yeah. It was you get one of those in those days, you remember it, because obviously you're never going to let them go. Nobody else can have him, and it breaks the season if someone gets a player like that. And so that season, yeah. So, I mean, it was all I remember really is just the social aspect of it, the getting together every month, making your transfers, and watching a game together. Fantasy football back then was purely a thing to do with your friends, and you did it socially as a group of friends. There was no global rank. You didn't really care how you compared to anybody else other than the mates you were playing with in your mini league, and that's changed. Yeah. It's still there. But at the heart of my fantasy football experience, the very start of it, was the social aspect.
Okay, so I've got a usual question here that I ask more newer content creators. When did you decide going to being an FPL player to a content creator? I mean, I guess with you, that's setting up FF Scout. Is that right? How did it come about, the beginning sort of involvement?
Well, I started playing FPL because of Lee, or Granville, as he was known. When I moved to my current employer 20 odd years ago.
You work in computer games, didn't you?
Yeah. So when I started there, I'd quit playing fantasy football at that point, because the friends I was playing with had drifted off and got families and other jobs, and I didn't have contact with them. So because the social aspect was the only driving force behind playing it then, we didn't keep it going because we couldn't meet up anymore. So it didn't seem worth it. I joined the company I'm working at now 20 odd years ago, and when I got there, they had a public forum, not a public forum, a company forum, and very message boards as it was then, and it was very active. And in there was a fantasy football kind of channel where you went, I thought, oh hello, who's in this? I had a look at that, and then I went in there, and there was this fella called Granville, really being opinionated, and he seemed to be a very dominant figure in whether this fantasy league was at work. He called himself Granville on the message board, but his name is actually Lee when you met him. So when I met Lee, I didn't know he was Granville. When I said to him, "Who's this Granville fellow who reckons he knows about football?" And he went, "It's me, it's me." And then he went, "Oh, you want to get in our league? If you think you can, if you know your stuff." And I was like, "Okay." So I joined the league. And then that's how it started with me and Lee playing FPL for the first time. I think that was 2003, 2004. I think that's my first year. I don't know. I have to check.
That's pretty much when it started then.
I think it was a year after it started, second year. And then, I started playing it with him, really loved it, really enjoyed it, really enjoyed the social aspect of beating Lee. And then I thought to myself, well, I'm doing a load of research for my team anyway. And the thing is, I used to be an online journalist. I used to be a magazine journalist, but at the end of my career at Future Publishing, I was looking after online as well, before websites were really massive. I'm that old. So I knew how to build a website, and I knew how to write articles because I was a journalist.
Mark, was it anything out there in terms of fantasy football content?
No,
there wasn't.
There was a Yahoo blog. There was a Yahoo game and a Yahoo blog, and that was about it, really.
I mean, younger viewers might have trouble remembering that, but back in the early days of the internet, it was just BBC, the big websites, and then catboards, weren't it? That was pretty much it.
Yeah, that's right. And there was no advice on FPL other than a column called The Pundit, which the game developers wrote, which was just an article every week. And there's more to come on that in a bit. But so there was nothing really. And I it was one Christmas, and I was like, oh, my partner at the time said, "Oh, my mum wants to get you a present. What should she get you?" And I said, "Well, I want to build a website again. So get me some books on how to," because I got behind in my skill set, so I didn't know how to build modern websites. So I got some books for Christmas and built Scout one Christmas with those books, and started putting articles out.
They were like guidance on how to do it, sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think the first articles I put out were like Scout Picks, which is still going now, which is like, here's my team for the week.
Yeah.
And then I started doing injury news, and then I created the fixture ticker, which obviously is now a staple of every kind of, it's everywhere, isn't it? That kind of thing. Did the watch list bit by bit, the things that are still on the site I created back then, but did it all myself. I coded the site and wrote the articles, and the comments, it was built in WordPress, which had just started up at the time. So I was lucky there was a platform you could build it on. And it was a small community that started growing bit by bit. I remember getting in my car share in those early days and going, 100 people came to the site this week. It was that small. And I was really happy about the gradual growth. And that's what it was. It was just a hobby. I used to go home from work and then write an article, and it started to be more or less an article a day, and then started doing the preamble Saturday morning before deadline, and the comments board started growing, and people like Az and Joe started turning up in there, and Paul, who used to be key writer on the site and still working for Scout now. So a lot of the people that formed the early team that I created were the first people to turn up on the comments boards.
Right. Alan, if you don't mind me asking, I'm guessing it wasn't for money straight away with the subscription to that?
No, not at all. I never intended to try and make any money from it until the point where my server hosts were ringing me saying that I needed to go onto a dedicated server, because I was on shared hosting back then. Shared hosting was a thing. And what that means is your website's on a box somewhere with other websites. But if one of those websites gets really busy, it brings the box down and all the other websites slow down. And I remember being at work and my host rang me and said, "We can't host you on that box anymore because you're bringing down all the other sites because of your traffic. You need to buy a dedicated hosting server." And I was like, "How much is that?" And they went, "Oh, about £400 or £500 a month." And I'm like, "I can't do that."
You need to buy a box.
Yeah. I was like, "Well, I don't make any money off it." And they went, "Well, really, with the traffic you're getting, you should be making money from it." And I'm like, "Well, I don't know where to start." So I didn't really set out to do anything with it other than host my articles and chat to people, and it started to become something I had to make money from. And then I got some ad deals and sponsorship deals that meant I could get a better server. But the next real turning point was when Dataco, who at the time were the company that protected the fixtures and the copyright and the fixtures when they got in touch and said, we need some money if you're going to keep doing the ticker. And we're talking a lot of money. We're talking, 5 figures. So that changed everything when that happened.
5 figures, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was the subscriptions and stuff started then.
Well, no, that was for the license to print fixtures. So like in those days, a newspaper paid that money to have the fixture lists. So anyone who used the fixture list even in the way I was doing, which was in the ticker, you had to pay a fee. And so there were other football sites around at the time, like I think Football 365 was around at the time and so on, that were paying this and had to get so they had to ask FB. It was perfectly reasonable, but Dataco doesn't exist anymore, I don't believe. And I think the license fee on fixtures doesn't apply anymore. I think it got turned again. They're not able to charge that anymore from fixtures. So it's not a thing now, but it was back in those days. And that meant I had to go to another level when it came to earning money from the site.
Sure. So if we move on a bit, but remaining on Fantasy Football Scout, I mean, obviously the first place and another first in your impressive CV, Mark, the Scoutcast. So you've got the website. When does the Scoutcast first come about, and what was the idea behind it?
I think it's about 3 or 4 seasons in, and me and Lee were obviously at work every day together, and me and Granville rather, and I keep calling him Lee, but it's Granville as people know him as. And we had an audio studio at work, which was like a soundproof room. You could go in and we recorded voice recordings in there. So I said to him, this podcast thing's starting to be a bit more popular.
And what sort of date would this be, Mark?
Oh God. Well, it must have been 15 years ago.
2010.
13, 14, 15 years ago. Yeah, it was about 3 or 4 seasons in. So 2008, 9, somewhere like that.
Yeah, so
I don't know.
3 or 4 seasons really into early. The creation of Scout, the website.
Yeah. Scout was already well formed by then. Probably on its second or third iteration in terms of what it looked like. So we just got a laptop and a Yeti mic and sat in a lunchtime recording that once a week in the audio room, and the audio director at the time was very kind to let us do that. And again, it wasn't really thought to be like anything special. It's just like, well, no one's doing a podcast, so let's do it. And in those days, it wasn't about overall rank. We never talked about that. We only talked about how me and Granville were doing and what we were going to do to beat each other.
Yeah, a big rivalry there, wasn't there?
Yeah.
And so you originally put it on as just a podcast. And when did you? So I started getting into FPL about 2014, and by that stage, I think you were already on 2014, 2015. You were already on YouTube. When did you decide to put it on to YouTube?
About a couple of years later, so maybe 12, 13, around then.
And were your faces on? Because you were also the first face sort of content, as well, weren't you?
Yeah, I went for it totally. We just went. I wasn't. I wasn't really worried about showing my face on there and stuff, and nor was Granville. And we went. It was quite raw and lo-fi, and we never thought that people would come in big numbers anyway. So I mean, I didn't even look at the traffic in those days. I didn't even look at how many people were listening to the podcast. It wasn't a thought because there wasn't advertising or money tied up in it at all. And again, it wasn't done for that reason. It's just let's just do it and get it out there and see if people like it. And if they make comments on the website about it, great, that's about it. And so when we went on YouTube, it wasn't with, YouTube's going to come massive and there's money to be made. It was just, it made sense to do that because that seemed to be the direction people were starting to go. And so I was right, it was. So there you go.
And of course you had some amazing, I've had Let's Talk FPL Andy. I mean, it's or Slippers as you guys like to call him. You've created so many big careers. I mean, did you think when Andy first came on that he would, boom up to be such a massive face in the community?
Oh, he was great. I mean, everybody we had on the Scoutcast played a part and were brilliant. Joe and obviously Granville and Az and Andy and Luke, these are people that, fancy football's in their blood and still is, and that they were obsessives. Right? Nobody on the Scoutcast just had a passing interest in fancy football. Otherwise they wouldn't have been on it. The people who helped me in those days, either on the Scoutcast on the website, like me, are still playing that game now and still really care about it, and that you could tell, right? In everything we did, the passion and obsession that we had for the game showed in everything we did. And hopefully does now.
They were all working for you for free, basically, weren't they? Especially at the
they
beginning.
were then, yeah, because we weren't making money where we could pay people, and they did it because they enjoyed it, just like I did. So that was it. It was just fun to do. It was our hobby, and we were obsessed about it, and we wanted to chat about it, and we didn't mind people listening in.
Did you get a bit upset when Granville left? Because obviously that was kind of used to your two baby, I guess, wasn't it? And then he left. I don't know exactly. It was probably a couple of years into when I started listening, so 2016, 17.
Yeah, I mean, he had other things on. He had a family, and he had a political career that was taking off. And I think that it was hard even those days to give up time to do it. Particularly when you start having a family. I started to have a family as well. So, and it starts to become like, well, if you can't do it Monday night, can you do it Tuesday night? And you know what I mean? It starts to become a real clash with your own life balance, right? So we both had jobs, of course, as well as having kids and family. So no, I mean, it's just one of those things. But we stayed in touch, and we do to this day. And I always credit him with being the person who got me back into fantasy, and obviously was a huge supporter of what I was doing and played a massive part in what we did in the early days. So he's a significant person in what Scout became and my whole path to what I do. And so yeah, I mean, those days I look back just so fondly. I mean, I still think what I consider a legendary Scout cast episode, the wild card that I played, where everybody was there. Andy was there, Az was there, Joe was there, and Granville was there, of course, and it was just unbelievable. It was fantastic.
Terence Trent.
Yeah,
I can't remember.
And the
Derby.
Terence Trent Derby, as Joe called him at the time. And then because Trent wasn't a thing, he just came into the scene, and I bought him with my wild card because I thought, you know what, I think there's a player there. And I also bought Ruben Loftus-Cheek as well with my wild card. And Joe ripped me to bits, Granville ripped me to bits. And it's just, I think that episode, for me, when I look back on it, just encapsulates everything about FPL content, which is, what you think you're right and other people think you're wrong. And then the fun you can have between individuals who argue about that. It's just the very essence of why we play this game, isn't it? And so, yeah, they were heady days, fantastic times.
One thing I forgot to ask you before we started talking about the Scoutcast was, as part of creating FF Scout, you also created the first Rate My Team tool. I think it was the first one, which is now such a big thing, with FPL review and that. I mean, what was the thinking when you did that, and how difficult was it to create?
Yeah, I mean, I should say that Scout became a business, and I got what happened was I was at work, and a couple of American guys who owned a website called Draft Sharks got in touch and said, we want to buy half your business and we'll pay you this amount of money to leave your job and come and work with us on Scout. And when that happened, I didn't know what to do. And so I reached out to a fellow called Chris, who I knew from my magazine days, who had websites of his own and was a business person who knew business better than I did. And when I met him and showed him my traffic, he said, well, don't go with those guys. Let me invest. Do you have any ideas on what you can do to monetize it, to make it into a business? And I was like, well, I have actually, because no one really publishes Optastats. And I think if we took Optastats and made them available to people, to fancy managers, I think people would pay money to get access to those Optastats. That's what we did.
It's like that and the Rate My Team tool. That's sort of what the subscription
I'll talk about that in a minute. Yeah. So we started with the Optastats and the members area, and Chris invested the money so we could get the data and and build that. And I brought in a fellow called Ed, who I met at Pip, who's my partner now. I went to, in the first year meeting her, I went to a wedding and I happened to be sitting next to Ed's partner. And I said, "Oh, what does your partner do?" And she said, "Oh, he's a web developer for Yahoo." And I was like, "I'm actually looking for a web developer." And then he became my tech director at Scout, just through the chance meeting. He built the members area. And then a year into the members area, I became aware of Chris Atkinson, who had built Rate My Team. And I said to Chris, my partner Chris in the business, "I think Rate My Team would be a good addition to the members area as well as the Optastats." And so I met Chris in a pub. He actually lived near me at the time in Sussex. And
so Mark, so it existed outside of FF Scout then?
It did originally, yeah,
right,
yeah. Okay. I was aware of it because he got in touch with me as an early tool and he said, "What do you think of this?" And I supported it and was like, I was using it and gave him feedback. And then I said, "Well, what about making this available to more people?" Because it wasn't widely available then. It was a tool that he shared with a few people and a group of people. I was one of them. Okay. And I thought, well, let's publish it. Let's get it out there. Let's get everyone using it as we can. And that's what happened. So that was the first model that was built. And yeah, I helped Chris, by putting it out there, but he was the genius behind it. And then I remember as well the day that Chris came to me and said, "There's a guy who's doing this thing called Review. It's really good. You ought to take a look." And that was some years later. And now we know Review for what it is.
Yeah. Awesome. So, I'm guessing then, you can tell me if I'm wrong, the next thing that sort of happened was working for the Premier League. I was just wondering if you could tell us how that came about, Mark.
Yeah, so I mentioned they had a column called The Pundit. So a few years into Scout, I got contact from the Premier League saying, "The fellow who does The Pundit no longer can do it. And we see you've got this website. Would you like to take over writing The Pundit for us?" So I did. So I wrote an article. We never talked about it at the time. It never had my name on it. I just wrote it. I ghostwriter for them and put the article. They put the article up and it was written by me for years. Nobody knew. Nobody knew it was me. And I never shouted about it and I got a little bit of money for it, but it was great to be working with the official game and be published by them. I thought that was brilliant and thought that was where it would go. It wouldn't go any further. Then year by year, I got more involved until one year, they approached me and said that they had big plans and they wanted to do much more FPL content on the site because they could see how big the game had become. And they wanted to work with us at Scout to help them do that. And that's when I started working with the Premier League and writing a lot more articles and being a lot more involved and creating a team that would work on that stuff and doing the TV show as well. That was absolutely crazy time.
Yeah. It was it actually on TV? Because I always used to watch it on the app.
No, it was never on UK TV, but it went all around the world. It went in Australia, India, and the first episode was recorded. So I did this first episode I went to the screen test reluctantly because I was never really wanted to do it. I was petrified of doing TV. I mean, I've done YouTube, but when you're in a TV studio, and the first one, I did the screen test and I thought, I didn't really do a good job of that. But they said, "Actually, we really liked you. You did a good job. We want you on the show." And I was like, "Oh God, okay." And I was already working this contract with the Premier League anyway. So I was like, well, that's fine. I'll do it as part of that. It's fine. It's an opportunity. It's exciting, even though I'm dreading doing it.
Yeah.
So I did it, obviously with James Richardson and Jules Breach, who, it was incredible sharing any time with them, let alone sharing camera time with them. Just meeting them was crazy. Because James Richardson, someone I grew up with, obviously, as you can remember, Football Italia, and Jules was starting to appear on TV more. And so we did the first show. It was recorded. And I was really nervous and did that. And then I came back the second week and they said, "We're live this week. We're not doing it recorded anymore." And the audience figures are like 8-9 million. And I was like, what the hell? So
I mean,
it's crazy.
That's like more than almost any TV show gets in this country these days, isn't it?
Yeah, that's the global audience though. I mean, obviously with America and India and Australia, these are big audiences, and it went out peak time in a lot of those countries. So while it wasn't a big deal because it never went out in the UK, so it was still very intimidating to do live TV, knowing it's going out peak time in those countries. So I'd never done anything like it, and it was a great experience, but really, really tough. I mean, people who work in TV and do live, hats off. It's very difficult.
Yeah. I was going to say, so if anyone was too young or didn't watch that at the time, it was basically those guys were the presenters, and they'd come to you like as the expert, quote unquote.
Oh, don't use that word.
Oh, yeah. Well,
Be careful.
But it must have been. You must have felt pressure, like with that sort of label on your head, even if a label that I've given you.
Yeah, and I was asked like, what's your best achievement in FPL, and I've had 2 outstanding ranks. But really my second best rank was that year. So the first year was the FPL expert and being on the TV show and being part of what the Premier League offering was. I came 115th in the world. So that was a huge thing to do that in that first year, because obviously people are, I don't know, but I imagine people are like, who is this guy? Who do you think he is? Why is he the expert? And then come 115th in that year was obviously like, I look back on that, I'm like, wow, I should be proud of that, because that was a lot of pressure, and I did well. So yeah, that was, I didn't really feel that, because the community, social media wasn't what it is now, and it was a thing, and there was activity on Twitter and so on. But nowadays I think if when you're doing that kind of thing, if you're on TV as an expert, there's a lot more people who are willing to come and have a go and say bad things about you. Whereas I didn't really experience a lot of that. But if there was, I quickly shut it down by coming 115th, I guess. But yeah, it was tough.
I've got a couple of questions towards the end about your pretty amazing rank history, at least historically. I know it's not been quite as good the last few years, but so you're working for the Premier League. You've got Scout, and then you take kind of an extended break from creating content, and I believe you sold Scout at the same time. Now I don't know. I mean, as mentioned it a little bit, I don't know if you wanted to get into that, or if you don't, we can skip straight across.
No, it's fine. I mean, it basically, I was working for the Premier League. I was running Scout with Chris, and it was too much. It was simple as that. And I think mental health, I don't think FPL, the game, has really had a massive impact on me, the game. But I guess FPL has had a massive impact on my mental health at that time, because I more or less had a breakdown looking back on it. I was working everywhere, in the train, in the back of a car, working on holiday, working all through Christmas. And I had a second child at the time, and I missed the first 3 years of her childhood. And I look back at it now, and you think you're doing the right thing. You think, oh, well, the business is doing well, I'm working really hard, and this is all for the family. But all your family really want is your time, and I wasn't giving them that. And at the same time, also, my health was it was taking a toll on my health, physical health, as well as my mental health. My mental health was probably shot, but my physical health was bad as well. I remember I had heart problems, and the doctor was saying, you've got to give this up. You've got to stop. What can you change? I was like, well, I can't change anything. I've got this business, and I'm in this contract with the Premier League. I don't want to leave either of those, really. But it became clear, there are things more precious, and family and health are right at the top, aren't they? So I decided to, stop working for the Premier League, get out of the contract, and also sell my share in Scout, because if I hadn't have done that, I think I'd have always been what I was at the time, which was so committed to Scout, and it was my life, and it just absorbed me so much, and I worked around the clock so hard on it that if I hadn't let it go totally, I wouldn't have stopped doing that. So I had to, for health reasons. As it turns out, 6 months later, or maybe less than that, I was bedbound for like 3 or 4 months with an illness that nobody knew what it was. I had vertigo and dizziness, and so I did it just in time, really, but maybe too late, because I still had the health problems afterwards.
Yeah, I would definitely, I'd say that for anyone who's in that sort of situation, health is always most important thing to prioritise, isn't it? So you were out for about 2 years?
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. And I'm guessing you started to as you were getting a bit, I guess you started to miss it. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, I mean, I think I remember distinctly being when I was ill when I was home for 3 months, couldn't get out of bed because I didn't have any balance at all, and nobody really knew what it was. But I was watching a lot of content from my bed, listening to a lot of podcasts, watching a lot of streams, and I remember watching Planet FPL, and they were doing their regular shows, but they did a 24-hour show.
24
which they had
hours?
Yeah, they did a charity 24-hour thing. Yeah.
Bloody
yeah.
hell.
Look it up. It's still out there. So James and Sergio, I didn't have a clue who they were, but I just started to fall in love with James and Sergio and what they did. And that kind of made me think, I miss it. I miss not doing this stuff. And they had this 24-hour stream, and I'm like, I should be part of that. I should be part of this. I should be out there doing stuff and being on things like that with them. And the community's gone on and grown, and I'm not part of it anymore. And it's like, yeah, it really just lit the fire in me. And then I kind of made up my mind that as I was getting better, that I would start something new.
So, it does make me laugh a bit that you say that it was all the stress and stuff and working too much, and then the thing that makes you think you want to come back to 24-hour stream.
Yeah, well, I mean, I just thought what they're doing is just fantastic, and just seeing the community help the way they did on that occasion and made me realise that I was still in love with it. It's just it got out of control, and my tagline on Scout was "Mark created the beast. Now I've got to tame it," or something to that effect. Well, I didn't tame it. It did eat me up. So that's why I stepped back from that. But then what I stepped into had to be something a lot more controlled. My family were like, "Well, you can do stuff, but don't do too much." And so I was much more guarded about getting back into it. I knew that I had to do it in a healthy way.
And so, as when he came on, sort of talked about this, he said he'd sort of started BlackBox in a very preliminary sense, and then I think you messaged him and said you wanted to get involved. Is that right?
Yeah. Yep. I was in bed one night and I watched his pilot for BlackBox, and I knew he was doing Top Guns with Luke now and again. And obviously I knew Az and I knew Luke. And Az was on the Scoutcast, and I knew that me and Az had a good kind of
chemistry.
Repartee. Yeah, and a chemistry, yeah, exactly. And he was someone I could work with. He one of the loveliest people in the community, of course, and still is. And, hopefully, we'll go on to do even more stuff in the future. And so I thought at the time, well, if he's going to do this, then I want to be part of that. But I only knew he did a pilot, but I thought, BlackBox is a good idea. And, I reached out to him and said, look, if you're going to do stuff in the future, can I help? Can I be part of it? And I'm thinking of doing a podcast myself, but I don't want to do it on my own. And I see that, you're still doing stuff. I think you'll be great at doing stuff. And I want to maybe do something together as a partnership. And yeah, it was just an email I fired off. Crazy idea, I think I called it. And he replied quite quickly saying, wow, yeah, let's do it. What should we do? And then it went from there.
Yeah, and it's my favourite ever podcast, Mark. I'm not just saying that.
Oh, thank you.
I've got I've got evidence out there.
Yeah, the tier thing you did.
Tier
thank
list,
you for that. Yeah, it's very good to you.
I was just going to say one question about BlackBox, because I know we've only got another hour, which sounds like a long time, but I want to make sure we get through everything. The Match of the Day episode. Where I believe you'd sold, I can't remember the player's name now. Alvarez, was it?
No, it's Torres.
Yeah, could you tell us about? Well, maybe give a bit of context to the viewers, because I think that's your most watched ever episode when I looked it up.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So that was start of the season. And we'd done Fancy Football Fest before the season kickoff, and I'd shown my line up on screen, and I had Fernando Torres in the team. And I said, I fancy him. I fancy him for City. I think he's going to play up front, and I think he's a good player. And
he just joined us.
He can be a differential. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. And so I held him for the first 2 or 3 weeks. and he did all right, but he didn't score a lot of points. And so I decided that the time was right to get him out. Probably was about game week 4 or 5. And we happened to be doing the match day challenge that game week. So I just sold him into that. And he got 2 goals and 2 assists, I think, in the game. He got 18 points, I think. And I had to watch it live, and it was absolute agony because obviously I'd done the hard work. I'd taken the punt on him, got him in, and I was correct in the assumption that he'd be decent. Then sold him before he actually delivered on that promise that I saw. So it was incredibly infuriating. Yeah, it was, but it was great for the stream, and you know, it was such fun to share that experience with us. I mean, it's just, yeah, those streams have been memorable many, many times, and most of the time it's because I'm struggling and suffering.
I've actually got a bit of a personal story about that one because you did it on the Saturday night, and I'd been on a stag weekend, and I got so drunk over the 2 nights, and I had to get a train back from Bournemouth to London.
Yeah.
And I was like, how the hell am I going to get through this without vomiting, basically? And I stuck on that listening to you guys, and it was so much drama. I was actually fine for the whole way back. So you managed
Unbelievable. That's great. I mean, we never know who's watching. It's Ferran Torres, not Fernando. Why do I call him Fernando? Ferran Torres. Yeah, we never know who's watching. We're kind of oblivious, really, because obviously we're in the moment. We're watching Match Today, so we're not really aware who the audience are and whether they're enjoying it or not. We're just we're in the moment of watching Match Today as 2 mates who play FPL who've got their own interest in what's unfolding, and the joy and agony of playing FPL is unraveling right in front of your eyes. So it's a great thing to do, and it was an idea that we kind of made our own for now since the years we've done BlackBox, and we like to do them. I mean, we're probably going to do another one before the end of this season. And they've always been great, and we've always loved them. We do them because we enjoy them. We don't do them because we think, oh, a lot of traffic or a lot of hits. We don't think like that really about it. We just do it because it's like great moments in the season, and they're often ones of them.
So I'm going to skip through a couple of questions here because I want to make sure I think we've kind of covered what your early and later experiences of content creation are like. But I'll just ask you generally, what would you say are the positives and negatives of being a content creator on a sort of general level?
Wow, okay. It's an outlet. It's an outlet for FPL. I think that just playing FPL was never going to be enough for me, and I love talking about it. And, you know, obviously I'm not around people like Granville anymore, and none of us are really, because we're working remote, a lot of us now. So we haven't got that day-to-day around people that we used to have. So for me, doing content is just a way of connecting to another person and other people who enjoy the same obsessive hobby as me. And it enables you to do that. I'm with Az, and I've got that connection with Az, but also there's people in the comments and people who watch it and people on social. And I think it harks back to what I said before. It's that social connection with others who enjoy what you do and enjoy what you do in terms of a hobby. Like, they enjoy it as well, not necessarily what I do, but enjoy the hobby that you do.
I'll just say I've only been doing it for 4 months, but Yelena, when she interviewed me, I only had one night in a month last week I could make content, and I did it. I chose to make a YouTube video with Yelena because I love it. It's a brilliant way of connecting to people, isn't it, like you say?
Yeah, it's fun. I mean, you know, having done the Scoutcast all those years ago, and you know, so doing stuff on BlackBox just seemed like natural. I wasn't nervous or intimidated about doing it. It was just the fun of doing it. We never did it for the money. We said at the very start, like, we're not doing this to make money, and we never made it like a limited company or got an agent or anything silly like that. I mean, it turned into a bit of that because, you know, if you're successful on YouTube, people start offering you sponsorships and stuff because they want to get their brands on successful streams and so on. And
the old the ball shaver.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny because when we started doing BlackBox, Manscaped was out there, and we were like, oh, imagine getting that. That'd be hilarious. Because I think we listened to a few of the people doing the ads, and we were like, oh, we'd have fun with that. So we'd always joked that would be when we made it. And so it's always very tongue-in-cheek, all that. We don't, you know, it's nice to get a bit of pocket money from doing it, but it's not the reason why we did it. The reason why we did it is just that connection with each other and the audience once a week is just something that I find incredibly enjoyable.
I always love when you've got a VPN sponsoring you.
Nord, yeah.
And as we say, what were you watching? You always say Columbo. It's like
Yeah, Columbo, massive fan. Yeah, and you can get a bit more of Columbo now, but you can't get all the episodes. But I think you can get them from other countries. So yeah, Columbo is one of my other guilty pleasures, and yeah, I doing content is just, I love it. I love doing it. I love seeing other people do content. I love what the community are doing, and it's exploded, isn't it? The whole FPL scene, and we've alluded to the fact that Scout had a part in that, and I feel really proud that I was a part in the early days of, and now what it's become. It's great, and community and other people and the social aspect is why I play FPL, and content helps with that.
So what about the negatives, Mark?
What negatives of being a content creator?
Yeah, beyond, obviously you've gone through your own personal story about getting too involved, but just apart from that, if there's anything else.
I guess you are very public, right, with what you're doing and what you're saying and your team and how you run your team. And I guess that in recent seasons that's come under a lot of more scrutiny. There's people out there who want to take a shot at you, maybe. Like I said, I didn't really exist when I did the FPL show, so I was quite fortunate.
Really?
Even on I didn't. No one really had a go at me when I was doing that.
Even on that bigger platform? Wow.
No, not really. I mean, you saw the odd comment about, that's only an assist because Mark's got him in his team and stuff, but I laughed it off. I mean, God, if people knew how much effort goes into getting those decisions right, and I think people who know me and have watched my content know how much I care about the integrity of the game, and there's no way I'd put my own team in front of a decision that could affect the wider game. There's no way I would have done that. So at the time, that was light. It never really went on. Now these days it does. These days content creators come under a lot of criticism and flack, and I don't like to see it. I mean, obviously there are content creators out there who do things for the money and make decisions based on money, but I'm sympathetic to that because I was under that pressure on Scout. A Scout grew and became a business and I was paying salaries. Suddenly you have to start making decisions that are commercial decisions, and you have to do things that perhaps you think, I don't really like it, I don't feel comfortable, but I need to pay the bills. I've got salaries to pay and stuff. So when it's your life, when it's your livelihood, things change. And people who have a go at content creators for doing things for money don't realise, they've got to think, this is their job. Like, that's what they do for a living. And if you had 100 people watching you at work every day and every decision you made at work and then criticising you on social for it, how would that make you feel? It's tough. And I feel for them sometimes.
Yeah. I was just going to say, do you feel, because obviously you felt that pressure before you make BlackBox, but now sometimes on BlackBox you seem to go rogue, almost like knowing that you don't have the pressure. I'm thinking of one season when you went with Salah when no one else did, I think. Would that be fair comment? Yeah.
I mean, I've said before on there that I've got a lot of seasons behind me. I don't really have anything to prove, really, in terms of, am I a decent manager? Yes, I think I am. I've got a record that shows it. So I don't need to worry about what people say about me. And what I do, it doesn't depend on my rank anymore. So I'm fortunate in that respect. So, if I was starting out as a content creator, I'd absolutely take fewer risks because I think some people, rightly or wrongly, credit credibility to where your rank is in the world. So it is a thing for some people as to how they judge them. I get it. I totally understand it. For me, I can be a bit more kind of loose with my decision making, and that's for me is playing FPL. It's like let's try something different this season. Let's just try a different approach. Don't do the same things that worked before, perhaps, because maybe it's better, more fun to try something new. And every season I start, I go, what am I going to do differently this season, or how am I going to tweak things this season? And I can have that fun, and that for me, that's part of the joy of playing the game.
And it makes BlackBox fun to work as well, to be fair. Even more fun, I should say. I should have asked you this a bit earlier, probably, when we were talking about, but I'll mention it anyway. as mentioned when he came on, that you could probably be the sort of person that would stress yourself out in a massage room with relaxing music playing in the background. Do you think?
Yeah.
Do you think being a perfectionist can make a content creator's life more difficult?
I think I do set high standards. I mean, I wanted BlackBox to be technically good, sound good, look good, all the data to be right, be on time, be every week. You know, like I Scout didn't become what it became without me having high standards.
Yeah.
So, and I worked very hard to achieve those, probably, and nearly killed myself doing it. So I think that's in life how I am. If it's something I love and care about obsessively, and fantasy and what I do around fantasy definitely is, I want to do it as best I possibly can. And I do set myself a high bar and then perhaps struggle to reach that all the time without detriment to what, you know, my health or whatever. So, but quite frankly, I don't care. I'm an obsessive person who wants to do good stuff. You know, it's more than a hobby for me. It's something that I really, really care about. And so I'll always do it to the best of my ability. And so when it doesn't go well or things go wrong, I get stressed about it.
Yeah. No, I'm exactly the same, mate. So I like to think, Mark, there might be a few new-ish or up-and-coming content creators watching this. Is there any advice you'd give to anyone wanting to start out? And I'm thinking specifically here in the YouTube sort of space.
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously be consistent. Find a way of doing what you do, but it's fun and you enjoy it. If you don't enjoy it, like the walkabouts that I did, right? I really enjoyed doing them. I can't do them as often as I want to because the job I've got just doesn't give me that bandwidth to do it. And you know, so I started doing them because I thought, well, that's a niche. No one's doing that. I really enjoy doing it. And I think that's what I would say to new content creators setting out. Find a niche if you can. Find something that someone's not already doing, or an angle that someone's not already doing.
I suppose Yelena's stuff sort of like maps it's what you were doing a bit there, doesn't it? Like in the seeing people. I guess she's reacting more in real life.
Yeah, she's reacting. Yeah, so it is different. But I really love that stuff. Yeah, I love the stuff that Yelena does, and it's the human aspect of playing FPL, which I think is the best bit. People want to see that others are affected in the same way they are.
I think that's where the gap in content probably is at the moment. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I know there's loads out there, but I know some of it might be criticised as formulaic, and you know, it's lots of graphics and the same players being pushed and that kind of thing. I think I like the stuff with a lot of personality. I like the stuff where you get an affinity to the people that are presenting it, and that doesn't, you know, everyone's got their favourites and everyone connects in different ways to different people. The stuff that I enjoy, the people that I connect to, and I enjoy listening to and enjoying you know, how they present stuff and their sense of humour or their knowledge or expertise. So it can be very subtle. You know, everyone has their favourites, and so I think that you can come into the scene with something new and find people who connect with you quite easily. It depends. If you come into it and go, well, I'm going to make a living out of this, I'm going to coming into it and I'm going to have 10,000 subscribers by the first year, 20, you're not going to make a success of that, right? I mean, I remember from doing the Scout cast, like I said, we never even looked at the traffic. We did it for the fun. We didn't have a clue how we were doing. Or, I remember one year, I think we were on episode 80 or something. I said to Grandpa, blimey, we're in the top 10 for sports podcasts. And we had no idea we were. And you know, it was crazy. And then you start going, oh, blimey, maybe we should take it more seriously, because you know, it was, you got to set out not to have goals and targets. The reason you're doing it is because you enjoy it. If that isn't the reason you're doing it, it's not going to last, because you won't get growth quick enough. You won't make money quick enough. You have to spend 2 or 3 years just grafting or grinding, to use a gaming term. And you've got to get through that. And the only way you get through that is if it's fun.
I think I'm right in saying, unless you get to like Andy Raptors level, you're not going to be able to earn a full-time living off it anyway, are you? Like,
oh yeah, but they have to work bloody hard to get there. You know, like to do videos every day, to edit them, to come up with content, to be good enough to be on front of camera every day, deliver that in a professional way or a way that connects to people. People think that's easy. It's not easy. It is bloody hard. So, all fair play to them for whatever success they have and have in the future. They earn it. They're talented and they're good at what they do.
I didn't mean it in a derogatory way, Mark. What I was basically saying is, unless you get up to that higher echelon, which is only a certain amount of space for, you're not going to earn enough to give up your day job.
No, not at all. But I know that people outside of FPL, people start podcasts and dream about, oh yeah, I could do this for a living, couldn't I? You know, imagine that. It's like, don't think like that. Do it because you love it, and do it because you've got that connection with the other person. You do it with all the audience that you slowly start to grow. It's going to be very slow progress. Don't set out to do it because you love doing the process. And if you love doing the process and you love doing the content, or maybe you've got that connection with the person you're working with, that should be enough to get you through the first 2 or 3 years. And after 2 or 3 years, if what you've got is worthwhile, you'll know, right? Because people will start turning up more often, and you'll get comments and you'll get a back in, and then it does snowball, and it's great to see.
Awesome. So last 2 questions I ask here, Mark. One is, I usually ask, how did you come up with your channel name? But as is already explained to me, BlackBox.
Yeah, he did that.
So I'll ask how you came up with Fantasy Football Scout as a name.
Yeah, I mean, I went to a lot of American websites for NFL and looked at what they were doing. I think there was an American NFL Scout, but I just felt that the whole idea of what I was doing was scouting players to help people, and it made sense. And I think it had a good identity. And I remember the first logo, I did it myself for a bit of clip art with a flat cap and stuff, and that image of a scout felt good. And
it's never changed, is it?
No, the logo has changed because I went and got a professional designer, Will Howe, to do the current logo. So when we became a business, I thought, well, we got to get a proper logo done. Yeah, I mean, I just felt it was perfectly fitted to what I was doing and what the articles were doing. And then, you know, it's been a title that's worked, right? Because it's not just about FPL, it's about fantasy football. So it's not FPL Scout. So, you know, it was just right. I was lucky that I stumbled on a title that worked.
Yeah. And the last question, I mean, I always guess the answer to this one, Mark. It's, have you ever been recognised out in the real world for fantasy football? I mean, it's going to be yes, isn't it?
Yeah, it happens. Yeah, and it's fun when it happens. And I think when it happens, what I get from it is that instant connection to the person who recognises you, and suddenly you realise again that, you know, all the barriers there might be between 2 strangers meeting get broken in seconds by the fact that you're connected via this game, and you see it in them. You see that they love it too, and you ask them about their team and who they're captaining that week, and it happens on trains, it happens on parents' evening and stuff like that. It's really weird where it happens, and sometimes it's your voice. Sometimes people just hear your voice because you're talking to a friend, and they go, "Oh, I know that voice," and they come and find you on, you know, a few seats down. That's happened before, and sometimes, I mean, I love it when I'm recognised from my partner though, because it always winds her up. And the last time it happened with her, we were at the parents' evening when we were choosing the secondary school for my son, and we went to an open evening, and there were a lot of parents there, and I was there, and then someone recognised me, and this fella came over to me and said, "Oh, you're Mark from BlackBox, and I really like what you do, and like you and Az, and listen." And Pip was just over the way talking to a friend of ours. I said, "Oh, do you mind just staying there a minute?" And I called her over and said, look, get around. And she was like, "Oh my God." She absolutely hates it. It's so funny. And so, yeah, I wind her up with it. And yeah, I just like it because it reminds me why we play the game and do what we do, because it's such a great social thing that joins people together, and you can make friendships through FPL just like that. And what we do with Fest, what, you know, Ed and Gianni have done with Fest, and I'm a little bit of that. was that encapsulated, really. You know, I love the social aspect of fantasy football and always will. And I do think the lifeblood of fantasy football is the community that plays it and the connections between the people in that community.
Okay, awesome. So we'll move on now to the second part of the interview. Just a reminder, if you're still listening at this point, please like the video to help it get out there to more people, and please subscribe to help me get up to 500 subscribers before the channel hits its 5-month-year-old birthday. Thank you so much if you do that. So Mark, I usually go on there to talk a little bit about FPL and mental health. So I guess we've already kind of covered the relationship between mental health as a content creator, but I know it's difficult to remove playing FPL from being a content creator. But as FPL itself, if you can remove the content creator part out of it, ever had a effect on your mental health / mood?
I guess it does every week in small ways. You know, I've had bad seasons. I have bad game weeks. It's part of the experience. I think I'm fortunate, like I said earlier, that I've got a long career a long history with the game. So I've got seasons built up, and I think that gives you a certain foundation which you can learn and call upon when you have bad weeks. Like you know that, okay, it's just 1 week, and you know there's the way back, and regardless of how your season is going, there's always a way back. Seen some recent examples of that. You remember when FPL SWAT was hacked a few years back, and I think he was like 4 or 5 million and ended up top 100k, and stories like that. I always use as inspiration to kind of, it's never too late.
You had a big comeback yourself a couple of years ago, didn't you?
Yeah, the year later, I used that to help me, because I was like game week 21, I think. I was early in the new year. I was like 4 million and came 100k. So I know from experience I can turn it around. So I think I use that to get myself through bad game weeks. No question, though, it does impact us, and some of the stuff that Andrew was saying on the show that you did with him,
FPL Nightmare, just for anyone watching,
really did hit home, because I think that people have talked about mental health and FPL for a long time now, for 4 or 5 years, and Ross Raptor did some pieces on it, and I know he really cares about it. But I think Andrew really encapsulated the feelings around mental health and FPL better than anyone I've heard, and spoke really honestly about it, and
speaks from the heart, doesn't he?
Yeah, but exactly, but what he said is true. It's like, don't be ashamed to admit that it does impact you, because if you don't do that, then you'll never really conquer it. You know, it will always be something that casts a shadow over your weekend, and eventually it might get too much for you and you stop playing. And you never want to do that. I mean, I never want to stop playing FPL, so I've got to control how it makes me feel. And maybe I'm saying I'm old and experienced enough to know how to master that and how to shake it off, but I'll be lying if I said it didn't affect me.
It does. Yeah. So this is a new question I've added in just recently to the interview series of questions. I'm not really 100% sure how to ask it yet, but someone I know said to me recently that their football team they support won, and they didn't have any of the players in their FPL team, and they felt a real big conflict, and they wanted to almost quit the game because of that conflict between your team doing well but not your FPL team. Sort of that conflict. So I was just wondering if you've ever had anything like that, and what's more important to you, Nottingham Forest doing well, if they conflict, Nottingham Forest doing well, or you doing well in your FPL game week?
It's very easy. Forest come first all the time.
Okay.
All the time. I don't even think about that. Yeah, I mean, when Forest came up, I struggled the first year because I never really thought that Forest and FPL would ever combine. I never thought we'd get back in the Premier League.
Really? Even though
no chance. No, never thought. I never thought I'd live to see Forest back in the Premier League. Okay. Honestly, didn't, because I just felt we were a Championship club or worse forever. That's how it felt. I'm probably not alone in feeling that. I dreamed about coming up, and we flirted with it a couple of times, but I never expected it. So when the Cooper thing happened, I think I realised there was something in it, and I went to games and thought, we can do this. We can really make it. And then when we did come up, it was tough because I was like, well, how do I do this now? How do I play FPL with my team in the game? And I undoubtedly got it wrong that first season. You know, I didn't want to have Haaland against City. I didn't, let alone captain him. And yet, obviously, that's the right thing to do from an FPL terms. But I couldn't get to grips with backing a player against Forest. So first season was very much a learning experience for me, and then I kind of been able to detach the two since a lot.
So now
it's not easy.
Now you would captain Haaland against Forest if it was if it was the right decision. Obviously, it's not been great this season.
I would still struggle.
Really?
I would still struggle. Yeah. I mean, I think that what I'd look for is an alternative. I mean, like if I had Salah or Haaland, I'd go Salah. I mean, that first season we came up, though, Haaland was absolutely dominant. I don't think he's going to be that dominant figure anymore.
No.
I think the seasons to come that there'll be other options. You know, we've got Palmer and Salah. Hopefully they stick around and stay at that level. So I think I'd still struggle. I think I would. I think I'd look for a reason not to. I mean, I wouldn't care. I mean, if FBL review or rate my team is telling me that he's the optimal captain, you know, I don't always go with that. I certainly don't always go with that. So I wouldn't care that I'd be making a decision that might not be the best one for my FBL team if I felt like I don't really want to be thankful for a player scoring against my team.
That's what I was going to say. It's not because you're not betting against them because you're worried that you betting against them might make them do well. It's because you don't want to have that conflict of wanting them to do.
I think so, yeah. Particularly if I was going to the game. I mean,
yeah.
I mean, people will say, well, you get the best of both worlds. You know, if it turns good, then your team win, and if it turns bad, you at least get the points. I get it, but I haven't been challenged like that for a while because whenever Haaland's played against Forest, I've always backed just to shut him down, and we've done a pretty good job of him apart from at the Etihad. I mean, it's different at the Etihad, but certainly when he comes to the City ground, I wouldn't back him for a captaincy. Not many players do well at the City ground regularly, so you know I'm lucky in that respect. But yeah, when City play Forest at the Etihad, it's tough to captain Haaland, and I don't think I have. I don't think I've done that. I think I've always had an alternative. The first year when Forest came up, I should have done, but I didn't have Haaland. So I paid the price that first year. But yeah, it's something, I don't know. It's something I deal with. And it's got easier since Forest were a better team, obviously.
Yeah, I was going to say you'd almost be as likely to captain Chris Wood this season at home than Haaland. So last question in this section, Mark. What advice would you give to anyone who may be struggling with their mood or mental health as a result of fantasy football this season?
I think always look forward. I mean, I always, as soon as the deadline's passed, pick my team for the next game week, and I'm thinking about that because that's what you should engage with at that point because it's gone then. The deadline's passed and you're moving on, right? So if you do that, I do that good or bad. I mean, I don't even wait for points or matches to kick off. I'm already thinking about the next week and I'm already researching what I'm going to do and what my moves are. And I think that's quite a healthy outlook because you're then not fixated on what's about to unfold, like you've got some influence. And so I definitely do that. I definitely get in that mindset of always look to the next game week as soon as that's relevant, and which is normally 11:30, isn't it? So, yeah, that's probably the best advice. It was murder during lockdown when all the matches were on TV and stuff, and you know it was game after game after game, and felt like if you weren't doing well, it was gut punch after gut punch, and it was tough. So that I must admit that even tested me. But I think now I'm kind of got the resilience where it doesn't hurt me that much in the moment. I still get frustrated. I think stay off social media is another tip. I mean, I can't stand Twitter on match days. Absolutely loathe it. And you know, I still end up going on there and regretting it. I stay away from that because that can get to you, I think, mentally. I think you start seeing people on there going, oh, of course you should have done this. And of course this player did this, that was obvious, and that just gets to you, I think, when you start seeing things like that.
Hindsight merchants on.
Yeah, and just people celebrating points that you haven't got and stuff. And I just, I don't tend to shout about my points tally, good or bad. I just don't do that, and I don't shout about play. I mean, if it's a Forest player, maybe I certainly celebrate Forest players scoring points and goals, but that's about it. I don't use it to celebrate my achievements or otherwise for my FPL team. So I've learned to stay away from Twitter during match scenarios and weekends if I can. And I think that's probably a good tip as well. I think that's not going to help your mental mood. I mean, obviously in a good game week, you might enjoy it, but when things aren't going well and you're witnessing other people doing well, that's not going to help. So certainly do that. Certainly steer clear of social media once the game week kicks off.
Okay, so I've got a few extra questions here, but we usually finish, Mark, just by talking about how your season's going. I've got a few questions here about your amazing FPL history as well. But first of all, how is your season going? I should just say, for anyone viewing this, we're recording this on the 2nd of March, so coming up to game week 28, aren't we?
It's pretty unremarkable season so far. I'm just going to remind myself where I am. I think I'm just under 200k now. I was doing all right until last week, and then I had a pretty bad red arrow. I think a 50% drop. Wow. So I've not been in the top 100k yet. I think I'm 190k or around there. Anyway, somewhere around there. Not been in the top 100k yet, but experience tells me that there's every chance I can still get into that. And again, I'd love a top 10k finish, but I think it's out of reach now. You get a feel for when that's possible, and you need a lot. I'd need a lot of luck to come in to get that. Is that
still your benchmark for a good season, top 10k?
Yeah, I mean it's nice to add one, isn't it? Because it's long been the kind of target of FPL managers who on social or creating content, and I see why. I mean, I've got a good collection of top 10k finishes, so I'd love to add to that. And every season I go, I'd love to have another one of those. So that it is for me. I mean,
I've got one.
I understand it's more
one.
Okay. It's tough to do. It's tougher now to do than it was. There's no question, because I think I said on BlackBox a couple of weeks ago, like where I was in the world then, about 130, 140. I was saying to Az that I can feel that I'm going to get a lot of greens and a lot of reds that are going up and down 20, 30k basically. And to really push on from 130, 140k, you've got to have swings, which means you've got to take risks, and those risks have got to come in. And it's like, it's much harder to do now because, the best players, the best transfers, a lot of that is known. It's all out there, whether it's through models or content creators, people are aware of it. And so you've either got to be brave enough to go against that and then be lucky enough for that to come in, or you've got to take your time and hope that micro decisions go your way, like the captaincy or someone coming off the bench for you and with a bit of fortune. So, but those decisions tend to get you small ranks gains. They're not the big rank gains. The big rank gains are differential captains, and those are harder to do because, you're going against a big effective ownership normally, and it's difficult. So I think top 10k is probably top 100k, maybe even bigger than that these days in terms of difficulty. If you look back 5 years, top 10k then is probably top 100k now. But I still in my head go top 10k is what I want to go for.
Yeah. Have you, because I'm slightly frustrated because I'm about 400k and my rank is just plateaued. And I thought the assistant manager would be the thing that might give me that boost. Have you played yours? Because it seemed to be pretty much... I mean, there was some differences, but it seemed, give or take, say, 10 points, everyone was fairly similar of those who played it in 24.
Yeah, it wasn't as wild as it could have been, the difference.
Yeah.
So there's no question it could be with that chip, but it hasn't been because Slot had 2 double game weeks, right? So you're always going to get, from 5 matches, you're always going to get something from Slot, weren't you, that was going to get close to even those who had the variance on their side with the table bonus. So I think it was a unique situation. I don't think, if the assistant manager sticks around, I don't think we're going to have another situation where the manager of the team top of the league has 5 matches in 3 game weeks. Is that ever going to happen again? Probably not. It was quite a unique one. So I think it's difficult to judge that chip based on what we've just experienced.
Yeah. So for anyone who's possibly, I mean, I'm sure everyone watching will know Mark, but perhaps won't have known about your amazing rank history. Because, I mean, for example, Fantasy Football Scout have like is it a Legends where they sort of tally up
the what's it called now? Is it?
I'm not sure.
I should know because Chris Atkinson built it. So,
but basically, it's a summary of your last 7 seasons, isn't it? And then it ranks managers.
Is it? Yeah. I'll go on my Hall of Fame. Is it called? Is it
Hall
called
of Fame?
Maybe,
yeah. But you,
yeah,
you were topper there for quite a long while. Is that right?
Years ago, yeah. I was only top for a few weeks, I think. But I used to be in the.
You're up.
Used to be in the top 10, top 20, top 15, and I've dropped off it. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
but I think with that, you've got to have consistently good seasons. That's the thing.
Yeah. So what I was going to ask is, was that a source of pride at the time, and are you annoyed that you slipped down those overall ranks a bit?
Yeah, I mean it's lovely to be in that, but there's so many of those. There's 4 or 5 of those now all over the place. There's not one that's. They've all got different methods of doing it. It's nice to be in that, but I've got top 10 key finishes, and I've got top 100. I've got a top 100 finish and one just outside that. I've done enough, really. I just, it'd be lovely to get another high finish. I think I'd love one season to be in the top 100 at a stage where I could win it. I've never had that, right? So I've come 42nd, I've come 115th, but those were always seasons where I've come through at the end and never really sensed that. Maybe
you always
this
say
could
that,
be the year and stuff.
You always say that. You always say that you're a late season riser, like late riser, I guess. You always.
Yeah. So one year I'd love to be in with a chance of feeling like I could be in the top 100 early on, but I've never had that experience. So that's probably the only experience from FPL that I really want now. And maybe I'll never get it, but I'll be fine. That's fine. I'm not worried about that. So the Hall of Fame's great, and I'd love to be doing well in that. And I look at it now and again, and look at how others are doing now and again. But there's Fabio and people like that are just amazingly consistent. Ben Crellin now amazingly consistent.
Harry's up there, isn't he?
Yeah, there's fantastic managers who have their methods and probably stick to their methods every year. And I tend not to do that. I tend to kind of try something different, like I say. And, I don't feel like I'd have the same enjoyment playing the game if I did the same things every year and be as rigid with my way of playing as perhaps you have to be at this stage with the managers we got out there, with the models and the content. You've got to, if you find a formula that works for you, the benefits of that is sticking with it, I imagine. But like I say, I tend to just try something different.
Yeah, it's not as important to you anymore, I guess.
No, not really. I mean, like I say, I'd love that year where I'm up there, but that'll happen by accident if it's going to happen at all.
Who do you think is the best player in the world now in terms of consistency? Everyone always says Fabio Boards, don't they? Do you think that's...
I don't know. I mean, I think it's difficult to say because, the models definitely play a part. I think Fabio, I think the algorithms and the models played a part in what Fabio does to some extent. But although he does make transfers that are outside of what's recommended in those, he often does. I think all the modern content creators like Ben and Harry are influenced by the models, and I absolutely get it. I am too, but perhaps not as much as some. So I think it's difficult to say because they play such a big part in things, and they're really successful. I mean, there's no doubt that FPL Review is an amazing tool that can get you repeated success if you know how to use it and you use it well. You obviously got to have some luck still. The game has a luck element, no doubt, but those models are fantastic at helping you. So it's difficult to say, who's outright the best manager out there. I mean, Fabio for me is still someone because he was doing it before the models came along. And he's still effective now, even against people who use the models perhaps more than he does. I don't know to what. No, I've never met him. I don't know a lot about him, but he's obviously the one that I gravitate towards when people ask me that question.
Do you think it's fair to say, like, whereas based on what you're saying, whereas the best player in the world perhaps before would have been more about their ability to judge players. I mean, I guess it still is, but is there almost their ability to know? Because I'm a big fan of FPL review. It's led to my best finishes. But when to ignore the model and when to go with it. Do you get what I mean? Like that's
yeah. I mean, you can have success at FPL using review without even watching any football.
Yeah.
And people who use it argue. Some people who use it argue that watching the game can bring in bias of your own that can hurt the purity of what the model is recommending. Now, I will never play FPL like that because the connection to the matches that I watch has to be there, and I have to inject some degree of my own take on what I'm seeing with my eyes in my decision making. I have to. So that probably means I'll never do as well as I used to because there are people out there who don't do that who are better at it than me. Fair enough. I don't mind. I'd rather still have that connection to the football I watch because that is the essence of the game for me. And I don't want to play the game in that way where I just don't, I watching the matches is secondary. I engage with the matches because I play FPL a lot of the time. And some of what I see when I watch matches, I feed into my decision making, and that'll always be the case.
So I've got a question here. We kind of touched on it anyway. Why do you think you always say that your highest rank at the end of the season is always at the end of the season? Why do you think that is? Why do you think you start maybe slowly and rise up?
I don't know. That's a good question. Never really thought about that. I mean, it's not always, but often I end well. I guess it's that's the period of the season where research and effort planning comes in. Always has been because of the double game weeks. The chips obviously exacerbated that when the chips came in. The amount of content and the stuff that people like Ben does that helps you kind of achieve good ranks in the final 20 game weeks. It's also the period where data is more mature and you've got more reliable data because you've got 20 game weeks plus. So that's a bigger sample. So you can make better decisions using that data. I mean, 20 is still not a lot. It's still not enough by any means, but it's something a bit more than 5. So, or none at all. So I guess that's useful. I would say those are the reasons. And, I've watched players by that point and I've got a certain amount of information I've processed of my own that I would base my decisions on. So, yeah, that probably is behind it. I don't normally get off to a flying start. So, because mainly I'm basing that on a lack of reliable data, and I don't always go what the models tell me early on because I think that the models know the least at the very start because they're based on historical data and not based on current stuff. So I tend to go against the models to some degree. I use it for a basis of my decision making, but inject some of my own opinion perhaps a little bit more than I should. So yeah, the second half of the season is the bit where I do make up ground, and probably for those reasons.
Yeah, I've actually thought reviews not been quite as accurate this season as it has been in the past 2 or 3 seasons. At least based on my experience, it seems to have reacted a little bit slower than usual. I was just going to say actually, my best ever season, I have been in the top couple of hundred in the first 5 weeks. And it was
wow. Okay.
And it ended up being
How did that feel?
Well, it was great. They shout them out on Wildcats and everything, but it actually ended up being my worst ever finish.
Oh, right.
I think I was like 350,000.
Right.
So I was going to ask you this. Maybe I should have asked you this earlier in the content bit. Obviously, you've got a big rivalry with Az now. Well, to some extent, as part of the podcast, and previously with Granville. How important are those compared to where you finish in your overall rank? I mean, maybe you could give it separately for Granville and Az, because obviously there's quite a bit of time difference.
Yeah, okay. Granville, it really did matter because he was an opinionated bugger and I wanted to beat him. I loved him, but he was. As yeah, it matters, but it's the 5th season, so it's going to go 3-2 to one of us this season. So I'd like to get in front. The rivalry I've got with Az is not as bitter as the one I had with Granville. Like, we're not ribbing each other. We're not sending each other. Like, for example, when Forest beat Brighton 7-0, that meant a lot more to me than me beating Az at FPL, because I can go on about that for months, and that was such a big thing. So I think like the season where he beat me by a point was hilarious, because that was the season where I was like 4 million at Christmas, and I got back, overtook him, and then he took me at the end and he beat me by 1 point. And that was the season where, if you remember, the Edison clearance that went to Mahrez, and they didn't give him an assist because I think they gave it as a defensive error by the defender. And I'm like, what? That's an assist all day. And that would have meant I beat Az, and I didn't. I lost by a point. And so the moments matter, like the stories matter. But losing to Az, beating Az, that doesn't matter so much. But the stories along the way is what matters.
You can tell you're the bigger man there, because I think he said something like, even if you finished in 10 million, if he beat you, that would be...
Right, okay. I didn't realise that. Okay, it really matters to him. Now it really matters to him. I really want to beat him now then, just to piss him off.
I think that's what... I'm fairly sure that's what he said, anyway. So last question, Mark. With a massive FPL expert here, and sometimes I say that with tongue-in-cheek, but here it's really true. I'd be missing out if I didn't ask for your general advice on how someone can have a good season.
Blimey!
You must have been asked. You must have been asked that 1,000. You must have been asked that 1,000 times.
Am I the right person to ask these days? Probably not. How do you have a good season? Well, first, I think you got to go into it mentally prepared not to have a good season. You got to think that you're up against now a landscape of a game populated by a lot of players who know what they're doing, which wasn't the case when I started. So is this someone in their first season, or just someone who's played for a while?
In general.
Okay. So yeah, be mentally prepared to struggle. So don't beat yourself up when things don't go well initially. There's no question that the models help, right? There's no question to me that using something like review or rate my team for the basis of decisions helps, no question. How you use it and to what degree you put weighting on that versus your own opinion based on your analysis of data and your analysis of what you see is up to you. It's all a personal thing, right? I probably have 3 or 4 dials, and the models are one of them. And every season I decide to turn it up or turn it down, right? And might do it a bit. So I would say I definitely have models in there as one variable that you use. I definitely use data outside of the models as well. I use the Scout members area. I built it, so I would do, right? So I kind of love that. I still use it today and would recommend getting access to that or data from elsewhere, because I think all the models build that in. You want to have your own view of that data.
The thing I love to give Scout a shout, the best thing I like is the player comparison.
Yeah.
Where you can get all the heat maps and all that. I love looking at that stuff.
Yeah, that was vital when we built it. That was what I had in my head, and we realised that, and it's great. So yeah, so data, the models, watching football, of course, watching content, listening to content, consume it, find your favourites, find the people that share your way of playing. Don't use it as gospel, use it as one voice, like the models, like the data, like what you see. Those four variables, have those. Find the fun in the game. You've got to enjoy it, because otherwise when you have bad game weeks, that you've got nothing to carry it through. So play it in a way where you get fun from it. And that could be any way, it could be the people you got in your mini league and your best mate, or it could be you're doing content or whatever. If it's not fun, you're going to struggle when you have a bad week. And look forward, right? Always think about the next game week. Don't dwell on this one, like I said before. I think that's a really valuable thing to do. Nothing guarantees success, of course. But I do think that there's so much out there you can use that can help you have success. It's just how you've got to learn how you play and how you're going to put importance on any one of those things. Some people play with just the models. Some people play just by watching football. Some people might play with by looking at XG or whatever. I play with all those things as variables, and I turn the dials on each year. And that's what I'd recommend for anyone. Bring all those sources in, figure out which ones you're going to rely on more than others, and most of all, have fun.
Awesome. Great advice, Mark. Yeah. Do you adjust your... I adjust my... I have like a Word document of things that I do every game week.
Do you?
Yeah, I do. Well, just like, rules, but I adjust it every season. Like, what will I look at to decide on the captaincy? Do you have like a a process, basically?
I think I mentally manage that process. I think I don't necessarily document it. I think I feel I know each season to season what I've done that season. That's part of BlackBox, right? You have to learn your mistakes, but to learn from your mistakes, you've got to make mistakes. You've got to fail and fail fast and change it. So every season I look back on the one before and go, well, what did I get wrong there? How can I change that up? I mean, every year, like the models either become, some seasons they have successful years where they're very strong, and other seasons it's more difficult for them. So you can't always be sure, go, okay, well, I'm going to rely on the models for this, my transfers or my captains, because it could be that's a season that's throwing up so much variance and the models have struggled. Similarly, you can't rely on your favourite content creator because they might be getting it wrong that year. So
that's true. Yeah.
Having the same things every year doesn't really help, right? You can be absolutely consistent with your methods, and sometimes it does work. And obviously with people like Harry and Ben, it does work.
Yeah.
But for me, part of the fun of playing is going, well, what am I going to do differently this year? What am I going to tweak? And also what is happening in the season to make me rethink that process? Because, it only takes like Salah to play a different position, or, Man City sign another striker who's sharing the goals with Haaland, and things suddenly tweak, don't they? And you've got to decide, how quickly do I react to this? Is it something that I take time before I change my decision-making process here, or do I instantly react to what I'm seeing? And people who use the models will go, no, I'll wait for the model to react to it. People like me who watch a lot of football will perhaps react to it a bit quicker. So both can have success. Certainly my approach is more varied in its success. I can have bad seasons and good seasons. But I don't mind that, because that's where I find the fun. Like there'll be seasons where I make some crazy decisions that come in and I love it. There'll be seasons where I make the same decisions and it's absolutely miserable, but I deal with it because I know the next right decision might not be too far away. So, yeah, you've got to do what works for you, but at the end of the day, you've got to enjoy it. If you're not enjoying playing FPL, you are doing it wrong.
Yeah. So, Mark, thank you so much for coming on, mate. As I said at the start, I had sort of two dream guests. I mean, Az and Raptor and all those guys have been great to get on, but my two dream guests were like the Godfather and Andy, my favourite podcast and my favourite sort of daily content creator. So thank you for so much coming on, mate. I really means
no, it was great chatting to you, Gary. So thanks for having me on. And I talk a lot and I like talking about FPL, so it was never a chore.
Anything you want to say before we finish?
No, just thank you for everyone who supported me and what I do over the years, and I'm very proud to be part of this community and to be still regarded as someone that's worth talking to. That feels great. And so, yeah, hopefully people will carry on support what I do in the future and subscribe to Gary's channel because he's doing great stuff.
Thanks, mate. Yes, so thanks so much, Mark, coming on. If you enjoyed the video, please like to help other people get to see it. Please subscribe to help me get up to that magic 500 subscriber mark before the channel's 5th birthday. And I will see you in the next one.